anyone wanted this year, all we could hope for is to find some sense of community somewhere when we were all stuck at home. And whether that was whether that was your job or whether that WhatsApp groups with friends or family, whatever your community was, I found this really kind of nice one online, and so I just massively overexposed myself to them.
Evening, everyone. If I'm about to start, then welcome. I hope we're all well. I hope we're good. We're all good to go. Good to go, Dermot. Waterstones events. Yeah, yes. So 2020 has been a very challenging year for all of us, for obvious reasons, and physically, mentally, psychologically. And my friend has written a book about her time in 2020, and I couldn't wish for a better guide through this strangest of years. Like I said, she's a good mate, she's an incredible writer. She is both a kind of confidant and a drinking buddy and a sensei, and I couldn't wish for anyone better to be holding our hand and trying to make sense of it all. So welcome the writer of Life in Pieces, dawno'porter. Cue her now!
Is it working?
It worked!
Oh, and I closed my screen. There, hi!
How's it going?
That's all right. Yeah, good. How are you?
There we go. I thought when we got the briefing as to how that whole thing was going to work, I don't know what you were like. Were you in one ear and out the other? Because I was a little bit like that. And I was trying to focus, and then you got it straight away. And I thought, now I've got to be on point because I'm hosting this damn thing.
I immediately opened up the camera and then shut my page down and had a minuscule of a second panic attack, and now there you are and everything's fine. Don't do many Zooms. I'm not very good at it. I find it quite stressful.
We've got a lot to get through, but in what way?
Just that I'm gonna shut down halfway through, that my internet connection's gonna be awful, that my skirt and my top don't match.
The hair.
No one needs to know that. Yeah, the hair, all of it.
You ran off and went, I hate my hair. And I was like, your hair, I've never seen you with hair that doesn't look like that. So I don't understand. Why would you hate that hair? You look great in that hair. How are we doing?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm actually, things are great. I'm experiencing actual joy in 2020 because I got the kittens. And so, yeah, things are okay. Really, LA seems like a weird thing to say about America. It's quite a good place to be. Art might be going back to school next week. You might get some sense of normality happening. So with that hope, I feel quite good.
What's I'm lucky enough to have a few friends over there. How's it been in the pandemic? Because everyone always says that New York and Los Angeles aren't, the standard America as we always see them. And LA has always felt like 19, 20 villages in basically one city, far more than London or New York. So and it's somewhere where everyone drives anyway. So did the pandemic, when it properly was there in the eye of the storm for the first wave, and everyone was kind of properly adjusting to it, what was it like sort of living through it on the mean streets of South California? I mean,
we really felt it because we live, as I describe in the book, on the grungy end of Melrose Avenue in Hollywood, where it's busy. So we live, our old house, we've moved house now. Our old house was on an alleyway and then Melrose. So there's restaurants and bars and quite an active alleyway in the middle of the night. And so I'm used to quite a human wildlife, and it can be quite dramatic where we were living. And so when it all of a sudden went really quiet, I really felt it. LA is very spread out. It's not very city-like, but because where we live, it's quite hustle bustle. But the weirdest bit was just after the riots, when the National Guard took to the street. And because I live on a busy road, where the riots were actually happening, right outside our door was on fire, basically. And they parked their tanks outside our front door, which was the creepiest and weirdest thing, because we were still on the stay-at-home order, so there weren't really many people around, yet there was armoured vehicles and men with machine guns right outside our house saying good morning to us when we took Potato for a walk.
Metaphor literally arrived on your garden. Someone literally parked their tanks on your garden.
Oh, they were literally right outside. And we can hear them. We could hear them all day. And so that was one of the moments where honestly I felt like is this The Handmaid's Tale coming to life? Like, this is very, very creepy and very weird. It just added this whole extra element of fear and anxiety to people, which in America, if you can imagine the fear and anxiety in England and then quadruple that, that's how America feels.
It gets dialed up, doesn't it? I mean, I think what I loved about America as a child, and I'm sort of been visiting there the last 20 years, is that, and what I admire about it is that they seem to have this unity under one flag, and they seem to have on face value, a respect for each other on a day-to-day level that I've always admired. That seems to be incredibly fractured now, and I think that's in many ways. I mean, there's there could be so many reasons as to why that is. I guess but it's the obsession with self kind of writ large, especially in California. So has that at a time when we all need to come together? What's your take on how it's been?
I mean, America's got that kind of face value support system where it's like, you go girl, yeah, and there's not such a tabloid press here, so there isn't such a culture of dragging people down. So there is a lot of positivity in the air. You watch a daytime chat show in America and its audiences cheering each other on, and we don't do that in the UK as well. But as we approach this presidential election, this country is so divided. It feels split down the middle, and you see there is so much rage, and it's just a really odd place to be. The election is next week, and genuinely people are terrified, I imagine, on both sides about what's going to happen. I've lived here for 11 years now. I met Chris here 10 years ago, and I've never felt this it's never felt this kind of fractured before. It's never felt this tense and this uncertain. So it's definitely a weird place to be. And the weirdest thing is, I remember when watching Donald Trump get in 4 years ago, and I was sitting there with a friend just thinking, it's never going to happen. That's literally impossible. Of course this can't happen. And now you've got it, all over the world. No one thought any of this was going to happen. And so we're all just kind of dumbstruck and just waiting. So I don't know, it's strange. Chris and I keep saying that if Trump gets in again, then maybe we'll come home, but who knows?
Well, where is home now? I mean, that's the thing. You've been there 11 years, and we're not even going to let you in. I mean,
green cards now. It's so official. Home is always London and Ireland. That's always home, and what we call it. And we're open to the idea that we'll be back there again. I think there's this feeling that you kind of have in 2020 that I'm feeling right now as, are we wasting our time being here? Like, where even are we? Our nearest and dearest aren't even here. But then we've got to remember that people feel like that all over the world, even if they live down the street from their family who they're not getting to see very often.
Oh yeah, and that's very much the feeling back home as well. I mean, you'd be very, very lucky to see your family, even if you can organise that bubble. That bubble is it's quite hard to keep the bubble.
Yeah.
Listen, let's talk Life in Pieces and why you decided to write it, because you really, I mean, I read this great quote where you said, I didn't really want to, I thought my oversharing was done. I thought that was my 20s, and you weren't going to write non-fiction again. And I know how kind of preoccupied you are with and how busy you are with writing, whether it's another novel or a script. So in a strange way, I assume this kind of thing, this is a terrible thing to say, effectively a book launch, but this book kind of got in the way of you doing other stuff, I would imagine.
Yeah.
But something about it, you obviously felt like you wanted to go back into NARM and write non-fiction.
Well, it's a weird thing because it wasn't supposed to be a book. So I've got a blog, which is a subscription-only blog. My kittens are meowing at my toes. I've got a subscription-only
You can't say that without seeing them. Sorry.
I know. Sorry, hang on. Do you know what? They've just scuttled off. I'll grab her when she comes back. But so I started up at the beginning of the year thinking, and because I feel quite passionate that artists have to stop giving so much for free. And when Glamour magazine shut down a couple of years ago, I was their columnist. And I was like, right, I don't have a column anymore. And I want to write all the time. Where do I put it? I'm just not putting it on the internet for free. So I set up this Patreon blog where you pay a subscription. And I got enough followers for it to justify my time of like, you know, writing. But I honestly thought, what the hell am I going to write about? Nothing, I don't know what to write about. And then lockdown started.
Hang on, can I interrupt? How many, did you have enough followers to properly start shitting yourself thinking, I'm not sure, now I've got them, what am I going to, have I
what am I going to tell them?
Right.
I know, and there has to be like asking the people who enjoy your work for money directly from them is terrifying. But in my head, I was like, this is a fair transaction if I work really hard for them and I give them lots of material. As long as I'm working, then that's okay. I'm getting paid to do my job. So that was, and I still feel good about that. But I didn't know what to write about. Anyway, I started to just, when lockdown started, I didn't have the focus to sit down and write a novel. My kids just would not allow me that space, but I wanted to write because what I've realized is that my writing is what I do, even, you know, things are stopping me writing. I have to write stuff down. So I almost started keeping this daily diary on my blog, and I put the kids to bed, pour a huge glass of wine, and sit.
That's an ongoing theme in the book, by the way. So.
Very, very much so. And write my blog. And the readers just were loving it, and I was like, it's really therapeutic to just sit down. And I felt like it's good to be documenting this weird space and time, because I was dealing with a lot of big feelings, you know, after losing Caroline, after the fact that we weren't allowed to leave the house, we just all of these things. It was massive. And I just thought, I'm going to write it down. And it wasn't for another couple of months until, you know, my publishers were like, we could turn this into a book if you want to. And I said no initially, because I've been way more open about my kids in that blog than I ever wanted to be, because Chris and I are actually quite private about the kids.
And then they said, great, okay, then deliver your novel in a month. And you were like,
yeah, but then they basically edit.
Well, maybe
edit
you could do some of the diary.
Exactly. They were like, edit out what you don't want to put to a bigger audience. It's that simple. So I did, and then then the idea of kind of putting the essays in and taking highlights from the diary, the bit that I didn't mind sharing with everybody, and writing the essays. And suddenly it was, it's really nice getting a book deal when you've already written 45,000 words.
Oh yeah.
So, you know, it's not a stressful experience. Yeah.
So when you sat down with your first draft, I suppose, did you then, because it reads so conversationally and it reads like a diary, did you then go and edit that much, or did you add to it much, or is it kind of, you know, you sat down with a nice glass of Cabernet Sauvignon at the end of the night? Is that what I'm reading now, or did you go through it and go, well, actually, now my feelings about that lockdown and my feelings about grief have kind of evolved over, let's say, I don't know, 3-4 months. So, you know, how many edits did you do?
Well, I didn't edit any of the feelings or that. So that's the diary entries are as they happened. Sometimes what we do is, because we clumped it into sections so that I could write an essay. If you say there's a section on food, we did kind of.
I mean, every section is a section on food, by the way.
Yeah. Huh?
Every section is a section on food.
I know, we ate a lot.
It's really
and so,
a love letter to food and drink.
Yeah, so we clumped it into themes. So we'd take bits from other bits of diary and clump together so I could write the essay. But no, I didn't go back and like edit my feelings or about anything. But the essays kind of serve as a retrospective look on what was happening in the diary. But my editor, Charlotte, was amazing, because I said, look, I'm happy to do all the words, but this is an editing nightmare. And I can't, it's basically mathematics and I couldn't go there. So she did all the chopping, like moving it around, which was genius.
How are you with handing stuff over? Because it was only since I started writing, so my kids' books are like 20,000 words, which is long enough to, okay, that's really nice of you.
I love them. Art loves them.
Thank you. So they're 20,000 words, which is enough to kind of do a good plot, but it's enough to know about in terms of when you're editing. And the first time I've interviewed musicians so many years, and it's the first time I've properly understood what it's like to hand over that album and go, give it back, I want to change this, and then know that you've got to kind of, you know, like the arrows and send it off and, you know, into Valhalla. How are you with sort of just handing work over it and just saying to your editor, okay, that's it now, I won't tinker with it anymore, it's got to go?
Well, I think the thing to understand if you're writing is that nothing will ever feel finished. I feel like the kind of myth of full stop, the end, done, hand it over. I look back on all of my books and think, oh, I wish if I could go back, I would do this. And for me, it's never finished. So it's a point where really I'm so past my deadline that my editor Kimberly is saying, you need to give this to me now, or you're not going to get paid. Generally is how it ends. She's never said that, by the way, and she wouldn't. But I do think I'm better at handing work in and enjoying the feeling that it never will quite feel finished. But no one reads it apart from me or my editor before it's finished. I'm not one of those people that could be, oh, would you mind reading a couple of chapters of this and tell me what you think? Because what I've learned is the more people you ask to do that, the more interfering you get. Someone will give you a note that makes you feel insecure about what you've written, sends you off in a different direction. You start rewriting your book because they've said this one thing. And the thing that I have finally got to understand about writing is that it doesn't matter what another few people, that it's you and your opinion. And if you have an editor, they're the only people that you should listen to in terms of notes.
Yeah.
And usually, and when Kimberly, who edits all my books, usually just said, when she says to me, it's done, it's great, I've learned to trust her as well.
Did she edit your fiction and your non-fiction?
So Charlotte edited this one, but Kimberly edits my fiction. And we've just you get a relationship with your editor where I just trust her opinion. She knows my writing. She rarely tells me what to do. She would never suggest anything, but sometimes she'll say things like, you need to delve into this a bit more because you're not being yourself. And then she'll kind of say notes like that, and then I look back on it and go, well, that's just actually just writes crap, so I rewrite it. And it's more of a guidance relationship, which is.
So how does writing this, apart from the things you just mentioned, how does writing this and approaching a book, a non-fiction book that's very much about you, compared to writing a novel? Do you stop and think a lot more, or does it free you up, or?
I mean, it's way easier to write because I'm not trying to think of plot lines and make sure the characters are, interesting. It's me. It's way easier to write. The issue with this book was the fear of accidentally putting out what is it called? Memoir. And which I never, at the turn of 2020, thought I would do. In fact, I'm actually one of those people who thought I'm not interested ever in writing a memoir. And so this came out of nowhere, and I was really confident with it. And then when it was coming out, I was just so nervous because, like I said, I talked about my kids in it, which I've never done, and I talked about grief and my family, and I was really careful not to mention Chris too much because it's not. He wouldn't, I don't think he'd really mind, but I was like, it's not for me to put him in a book. And you just suddenly realise that to write about your life, you have to write about other people, and that's terrifying. Then the fear that they won't be happy with it, or that you've overexposed yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I know Chris well enough to know that he would just walk over hot coals, say, "Oh, I'm in the book. Oh, that's great. Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh.
That was uncanny, Dermot.
Knowing you and knowing, and this isn't about whether your husband's a Hollywood actor or whether it's about you have a following or there's notoriety or any of that. That's not the point. My point in this question is knowing you and knowing how not private you are, but how jealously you guard those that you love around you. When I first picked up, I was like, okay, she's talking about it again. But you've somehow, and this is a testament, and I'm saying this as your friend, but also as a parent, you somehow walk that tightrope of giving me enough of you that I'm really learning and I'm interested, and I'm seeing you're taking the world through your everyday life in this crazy year we're living in, without ever feeling like I'm looking at a book version of a Hello photo shoot.
Okay, well that's really good to hear. And that was, the blog originally was a lot more open than that. So realizing that the blog was going to get quite a bit of attention, I actually went back and deleted a lot of the ones that were really open.
The racist stuff, yeah.
Yeah, because there is, I love sharing, and I love it when especially women write books that are really open and honest about motherhood and relationships. I think they're helpful. It's always really good to read an honest version of, of that. And so it was really nice to share it. But yeah, my fear with the kids, I just don't want them to have any status in the public world that they didn't ask for themselves. If they ever want to go into this career and they want to work hard for it, that's fine. But I'm not sending them to school where people know about them. So it was a fine line, but I think I nailed it. I'm actually really comfortable with what I said about the kids in the book. I'm not, as some bits that I said about myself, not so much, but I think I handled the family stuff quite well.
What's it, having now been a parent for all of 17 weeks, I cannot imagine what it's like to one day literally be living your everyday life, and you've got a great kind of, or not great, but you've got a work-life balance with your children, and you're spending time with them, but you're also able to do your job. With the day later, suddenly you become a full-time teacher and parent.
Yeah.
I mean, that really comes across. The panic comes across very. You described that very eloquently. Just how that, that kind of. I've spoken to so many friends of mine that just we have untold amounts of respect for teachers now, far more than we probably ever had before.
Oh my God! How do you do it?
You're just doing a job that you feel, I just don't feel like I'm qualified for this.
I know, and also it's just that they're just so demanding, and I think the challenge that I got, and I know I say this in the book, but at kind of around week 1, I immediately realised that if I didn't abandon pre-COVID Dawn, as in try to do 8 hours work a day, and if I didn't abandon that idea, say that's just not going to happen, I can't do that right now, then I wouldn't be able to do it, because I had to just, the ages that they were, 2 and 5, they just needed us all the time. Valentine was still at the stage where he would sit down and watch TV and think, oh fuck it, the world's gone mad, let's just stick the TV on for 2 hours, and after 20 minutes he's bored, and you're like, oh my God, what now?
No.
And I was like,
no, you don't understand. It's TV. It's TV.
Just watch the TV.
That's our drug. What are you talking about? Get back in front of the TV.
I know. It was so hard, and it's, hats off to all the parents of every age, because even though our kids are incredibly demanding, we're still at a stage where we're their favourite people in the world. They were really happy to be home with us. Doing this with teenagers who do not want to be home with you, who can't see their mates, must have been impossible. I think the pandemic has been hard for everyone. I think on parents, and the selflessness that you've had to execute, and just the kind of the amount of energy you've had to give into it was really hard. And then so I fantasized about, God, wouldn't it have been great, like if Chris and I got to do the pandemic before we had kids, and we were just like fucking and eating and drinking and just having a ball. Of course it wouldn't have been like that. Like, it's very unlikely we would have ended up murdering each other. And then I fantasized about just me and the cat. Oh God, I've written 1,000 novels. But that's not the case. I'd have been horribly lonely. And I think, on those days where I was just like, I cannot show up for my kids today, I don't have it in me. I cannot find the energy in myself. And then just, a text from a friend who was really lonely would come through, or, somebody else that's really suffering from anxiety, and they just think they're going to be scared for it. And you're like, we're all going through something.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because I've got a pretty positive disposition. Luckily, and every now and again I'd be I remember the night we had lockdown, I put the bins out, and we'd been out for a friend's, he just got his qualification to be a QC, and we were fantastic, and we knew it was the last night. Actually, you got announced while we were out, so everyone sort of came home and was putting the bins out, and the streets were sort of like deathly quiet around our house, and I just thought, guys, this is how it's going to be now. And I had those sort of moments of, certainly not panic, but unease. And then, like you said, you would get a text from a friend who is living in their flat and doesn't have any outside space. And, a lot of them live for work, which is kind of, I totally get. And they are, a lot of people suffered. And so immediately you just think, it's going to be all right. We're okay.
Yeah. Exactly. And the thing is, everyone's going to be all right, and everything's going to be okay. And this is our, like, this is our generation's shit show.
Did you see, I don't know if you saw it because you were over there, but Amelia Clark posted it, and it's Andrew Scott reading a poem by a guy called Derek Mahon, who actually is a Belfast poet, who sadly died a couple of weeks ago. He was in his late 70s, which isn't old, but and Andrew did a reading of this poem called "Everything's Gonna Be All Right."
God, that sounds dreamy.
Unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Can I give it to you? Can I say it to you now, or
maybe.
Would that be a protocol thing? I don't know. Is that someone? Would Waterstones have to pay like millions of pounds because I've recited?
I'm not paying it.
Yeah, it might have an impact on your advance. It's so lovely though. I'll find it later.
Send it to me and I'll post it on Instagram.
Going back to lockdown, did the book help? Did the book give you catharsis on a day-to-day basis? Did the diary give you the catharsis at the end of the day to go, right, let's try and make sense of homeschooling and
it really did. I'd actually at the turn of the year told myself that I was going to get a therapist for the first time, just because so many of my friends in America have got therapists, and they were like, why would you not have one? You just get to go and sit for an hour every week and talk about yourself to someone that you don't need to feel guilty about hogging the conversation with. I was like,
every day in Los Angeles.
My dream. So I went to see a therapist, and I went to see one just before it all kicked off, and I really, really enjoyed it. But then I wasn't into it enough to do the Zoom therapy when it was all shut down. But I felt like I was definitely at a point in my life where I needed to start it's just venting a little bit. I feel like, you can, when you are a parent, and you'll feel this when he starts crawling around and you think it's a lot now, but then you've got to follow, it's a lot of work, and you can lose yourself a little bit. And so, if I'd have been told to keep a public diary a few years ago, I just wouldn't have done it. But something about me at the turn of this year just wanted to kind of open up a bit. And even though I didn't carry on with the therapy, I found this very therapeutic. I found you'd say something about a feeling that you were having, and then there would be people who would reply that they were having the same feeling. Some of this kind of conversation was opening up, and this idea that everyone feels the same way about one's really alone. And it was really lovely. There's a few of the Patreon subscribers who I'm sure are listening now, and we developed such a good friendship. It's like such a safe little community. I started to find the internet really, really overpowering. Mm-hmm. And I started to find
in the sense of the toxicity of it.
Yeah, after Caroline and around that kind of time, I was just like, what are we doing to ourselves? And I saw Twitter as this like dogfight that why have I just seen two people I don't know have a horrible fight? And that's going into me, and so I'm taking, whether I care or not, I'm taking that with me for the rest of the day, and then there's another fight over there and another fight over there, and I just started to feel like it was really stressing me out. And I just felt like I was putting myself out there into this massive kind of vortex, and it just suddenly felt very unsafe. So I kind of created this tiny corner of the internet where I could be completely myself, be nice and open to a really small but lovely audience of people who were all interested in what I had to say. And it reminded me that we have careers on the internet without trolls and without, half the people telling you that they don't really like what you do. Like, I've just cut all that out. So it was this, sounds so American, such a safe space to write in. And I got a lot from it. I got a lot of warmth and a lot of kind of, it sounds weird to say this because it was a group of strangers, but a lot of support. And you know, I think all anyone wanted this year, all we could hope for is to find some sense of community somewhere when we were all stuck at home. And you know, whether that was, you know, whether that was your job or whether that, you know, WhatsApp groups with friends or family, whatever your community was, I found this really kind of nice one online, and so I just massively overexposed myself to them.
I interviewed Springsteen last week, and you talked to a little bit about therapy, and he, you know, I've got no problem with it. I think, you know, I think whatever works for anyone, but I think that what's good about it is there's that level of objectivity that you're just not going to get from your friends.
Oh,
and he said, he just put it so well. He said, yeah, you know, I did it and I learned a lot, and I'm not doing it now, but I was just able to take those my lessons that I learned, and then I could apply them to my situation in my life. And I thought, well, what a brilliantly practical, intelligent way of looking at it.
I think it's brilliant. You can say, I actually had therapy before, about 10 years ago, when my career had just gone to shit, and I was in this total, like, how do I even claw it back together? And I went to see this therapist, very ashamed. I didn't tell anyone I was going, and I only went 3 times because she said something on the 3rd session that just clicked my brain. She said, "Why do you think you can't do what you've already done before?" And I was just like, oh yeah, I had a career and it just has gone a bit crap for a while. Of course I can do that again. And so they say you might just get a nugget from them.
Yeah.
That completely sorts you out. And so I don't think I'll ever be the person who goes every week for years on end, but I feel like you can kind of almost do this refresher course for yourself every now and then.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, with that in mind though, you're such a good writer, and it's obviously, you know, this suits you. It suits everything about you. So do you wish you'd started it earlier? I'm sure you've always written, but do you wish that, you know, could you have written Cows in your 20s? You know, do you think you could have offered up the same quality of work in your 20s, or do you think you're glad where you are now is kind of, and where, you know, when you start writing, when you start getting published 10 years ago? I
wrote my first book when I was about 25. Oh, wow. 26. So that was a really saucy book about dating on the internet. That my die-hard fans bring to book signings to get signed. And then, so I always wrote, and then I did columns, and I was a journalist, and I did all that. I could never have written fiction in my 20s.
That's kind of what I mean, yeah.
Yeah, thing is with fiction, you obviously get some fantastic debut writers in their 20s who do an amazing job. For me, I needed life behind me to put into those books, and I feel like it happened. I wrote Paper Airplanes in my early 30s and Goose, but they were very much based on me, and for me to venture in fiction away from my own life, I just needed to have lived it a bit first. So no, and I always thought I would, you know, start writing fiction when I was an old caftan wearing drunk in a garden shed when I was about 60, but I actually started it when I was a caftan wearing drunk when I was about 38 instead.
I was ticking off those. I was like, caftan, yeah, sure, drunk. I'm not going through like quick. I've got loads more to talk about, and we've got like 20 minutes of it. But I want it. But just very briefly, while we're on the book, your kind of chief take homes from these subjects. So the best thing you've learned to cook since lockdown and since you've written the book. Like, what's your one dish that's very much this year you've gone, hey, hang on a second.
Okay, that's a really nice. Oh God, I mean, probably my lamb chops with capers. Could do it with my eyes closed.
Talk me through that. When do the?
So it's a Hugh Fearnley Whittingstall. Olive oil, fried garlic. Don't shell them with the skins on. Take the garlic out. Brown the lamb. Take the lamb out. Garlic back in. Thyme. Splash of white wine. Let it bubble.
Where's the lamb at the moment?
It's just resting to the side, browned. Capers, put the lamb back in, bake in a casserole, lid off in the oven for about 20 minutes.
To go and do it now.
Oh my God, I just remembered it's what I'm doing tonight. I'm defrosting the lamb right now. God, this is exciting.
Do it. My favourite is a Sheets fried chicken. So it's Tom Kerridge recipe, and it's just chicken that you put in this kind of breadcrumb floury, wonderful mix, and then and you marinate it in milk or buttermilk overnight, and then you loads of white pepper, loads of paprika, and then you stick it on greaseproof paper for under 230 or something for 30 minutes. It's amazing.
Oh my god, that sounds fantastic.
Yeah. Okay, cooking tip. What's the drink you've found? You probably already had it, but that suits you this lockdown.
I mean, margaritas became the very essence of my being throughout lockdown.
I love that in the book that you said it's 3:00, and I'm thinking, what? How can you drink at 3?
Well, when you have kids my age, and they wake up at 6:30, when you get to 3:00, it feels like it's 7:00 at night.
How can you not drink?
Yeah, that's exactly right. How do you not start? The challenge was, how can I wait till 3:00?
I love.
Yes, the margaritas became the
Okay. I love the homage in the book to when you're going through foods that you have to have, and this really stole my heart. When you said you talked about a crisp collection that you add to, and I wet myself when I was reading because I thought I do exactly the same thing. I have a crisp collection, and I can never let it go. It went under a third earlier on this week, and I sort of freaked out a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's terrible. The idea the day that I ran out of crisps was a really terrible day. I remember it very well. Chris and I are both heavily addicted to fried potato. Mm-hmm. Delicious. Kettle chips, the cheese ones have become my favourite. Now I only really drink like a normal person.
Yeah.
I say on Thursdays I do a school pod, so I've got five I have to educate from 9 to 5, and when they've all gone at 5, Chris and I make a margarita, and I have the cheese flavoured kettle chips, and it's honestly the best moment of my week.
I had a very embarrassing scenario when lockdown, first round of lockdown sort of lifted, and you can have people in your garden. We had some friends over, and they came to me Casper, and I realised that all the crisps I bought on our last order, and I'm very much in charge of crisps, were all kind of essentially school children crisps. So I had to sort of go out and go, I just did a big bowl of French fry crisps and some Frazzles. Is that all right?
70s. I love it.
He's just horrified looking at me it went down well. The best book you read during lockdown?
Oh gosh. I mean, it's such an expansive time. I really enjoyed it. Sophie Hayward's The Hungover Games. I just loved it because it's kind of split between LA and here. I love Sophie, and it was funny and naughty and just a really good story about someone who kind of accidentally got pregnant and kept the baby, and I loved it.
Listen, I'm going to go and get my favourite book. It's 30 seconds away. So while I do that, will you just tell Emma about eye makeup tips, please?
Oh, so it's key that
Thanks for killing Emma.
Thanks. I could go on about this for some time. It's key that you don't use eyeliner, so no pencil. It's eyeshadow. So you want to get dark brown eyeshadow and just the eyeshadow brush, and you just sweep it along the bottom. Don't worry about it too much. It's okay if it's a bit blurry. Hang on, just move my selfie ring. Don't worry if it's a bit blurry, and then just kind of solid on the top. And I find that then, because it's eyeshadow, it doesn't run so much. When I use pencil, it all just moves. Any opportunity to talk about the strong eye.
My favourite book is this book by a lady called Rachel Slade. It's called Into the Raging Sea. Now, you might read that and think it reads a bit boy's own, and it's not at all. It's a true story of the El Faro, which is the last big shipping container or tanker to sink. It's a tragic story. 33 people lost their lives.
God.
But she's a brilliant writer, and she's based in Boston. And I reached out to her afterwards, and because it was so good, and it's the best non-fiction book I've read. Second best non-fiction book I've read in a long time. It's about sea disasters.
Well, I read this amazing book about a ninja cat. But it wasn't by you.
But it's honestly, get it as presents for your, for your menfolk, as it were.
Oh, great! That's such a good suggestion.
Because it's not really about. I mean, she had access to effectively what's the black box, and the story is just tragic. But it's not so much. It's more about It's about deregulation and climate change and modern America and hubris, and it's such.
Right. Okay, brilliant. I reckon Chris would love that. I'm going to tell him about that.
Right, really good. Okay, brilliant. I love the fact that the book is homaged and a love letter to eggs.
Love an egg. When lockdown started and they were saying things like there'll be no fresh produce in the supermarkets, the fear of running out of eggs. I have an egg on toast every single morning.
How do you cook your eggs?
I fry it.
Okay.
I fry it and cover it in salt and pepper and salty butter on the toast.
The thing is, every time I have an egg that isn't fried, I'm always disappointed and always think I should have just fried that egg.
Yeah, it's rubbish. It's like when you go to a restaurant and don't order the chips. Can you hear this? Hang on, I'm being approached.
But Mummy, I want to.
Right, this is Myrtle.
Myrtle. Are they brother sister?
Yeah.
Oh my word.
He's purring. Turbo purrs.
Is Myrtle as happy in a new home? I take it.
I mean, she's absolutely. Look at her. She seems upset, doesn't she? I think she wanted to go back on the streets, don't you, Myrtle? I love you.
Myrtle. Wonderful.
Oh dear.
We get out of that, don't we? Bit of Myrtle. And lastly, what and could I have, because I don't do this kind of thing, but how would I be with a weed gummy?
I mean, having the way that I know you, quite fun, I imagine. So it's weird. You know, I was thinking about the weed gummies today because obviously for anyone who hasn't read the book yet, weed is legal in California and I don't smoke it because it makes me cough and it's embarrassing. But I usually have them in quite weak gummies or weak mints. And for that first few months of lockdown where it was just about survival, I had one most days and it's not really enough. I'm not high. I'd say the amount that I would take, it would be the equivalent of probably a glass, maybe a glass and a half of wine.
Oh,
it wouldn't, yeah, it's not, I'm not like off my face or anything like that, but it's just a little edge off and it really helps with the anxiety that I was dealing with back in the early part of this year. And weirdly, I haven't had one in ages. And then I had one a few nights ago and it just made me really grumpy and annoyed. And what's interesting about
it... You make your own or do you buy them pre-packed? How does it work?
So you go to the MedMen, which is where I go, which is basically, as I describe it in the book, an Apple store for weed, kind of glass cabinets, and you choose, you know, young kind of millennials will, you know, tell you what's in each gummy, and I go there and I buy them, and what it proved to me is it's legalized because medicinally marijuana is a great drug and it's really good for conditions like anxiety and if you're just not handling it very well, which I wasn't for various reasons. And so when I took it in those circumstances, it really kind of leveled me out and helped me. But because I'm actually quite happy at the moment, weirdly, I took one the other day and I just got annoyed and I was like, oh, I don't really need it. It's not my No, it was quite an interesting little experiment.
Yeah, for sure. Listen, I don't want to be too flippant about this, but at the same time, I don't want to concentrate too much about it. But I found it very interesting how you approached, and I was very inspired how you approached grief in the book. And I don't really have a question as such about it. I think it was such an incredibly sad, unbearably sad time, and a very confusing and quite not kind of angry but unsettling time when Caroline passed. And actually, I found her funeral to be, it's odd, isn't it, with funerals? Because you know, I'm not going to talk too much about it because it's someone else's business, but it had that. It had what so many funerals have, which is this way of kind of mourning and yet celebrating a life. And I find it quite hard, especially when you go to people's funerals who are young, like Caroline was, and yet somehow it kind of, I think everyone got a lot out of that day.
I am so grateful that I was able to be there. And what kept going over and over if her funeral had been a week later, we wouldn't have been able to do it. We're so lucky we got to do it. And in terms of grief, you know, I lost my mum when I was a kid, so people have always talked to me like I have a clue what grief. I've had no idea. That hit me like a bus. And but the fact that we were able to be at her funeral was so powerful. It just makes my heart break for people who have lost people this year who haven't been able to go to funerals, because it's such an important part of the process. I mean, grief is, and I'm very careful in the book not to talk about Caroline, as like you said, that's not our story. That's, you know, that's her story. But you can't, I mean, you know, she was our friend, and so you go through this bizarre experience of the world changing when something so massive in your own life has changed. It was just the weird, I still have no idea if in terms of grief, lockdown was helpful or not helpful, because I didn't want to leave the house. I didn't want to see anybody. I went very, very, very into myself. I became very insular and very protected, apart from this kind of weird little outlet. But in terms of actually talking to people face to face, I couldn't cope with it. I would just be a mess. So I think in some ways it was like I was given this time, like we were given this time. But then in another way, as soon as you start to kind of open up and see people, it all kind of kicked in all over again. So, I mean, there's, you know, there is this unbelievable collective experience of grief this year, which I think is something that we're all gonna have to help each other a lot when we come out of all this.
I think also it's the fact you live so far away as well. There's that kind of almost claustrophobia to that feeling where you like, I think you said when she first passed, you just want to get on you just want to get on a plane, just come home, stay at home, and even if you're not around her friends or people that even know, just the fact that you're here would have probably lessened that anxiety, I guess.
Well, it was, but you know what, as we're having this conversation, I remember when I came back for her funeral, I landed and I came straight to your house and I spent the night with you and Dee, and I honestly, all I can say is that week was huge, and I'm just so grateful that we all had each other, and you know, that we were able to be with each other, because like I said, a week later and we wouldn't have been able to do any of that.
Yeah, and it's just so, I think it was just so, I totally agree with you, and it was so confusing at time. So to handle that in solitude would have been completely nuts. Yeah. Were you tempted to go further in the book at all? I don't mean personal details or anything. Were you tempted to go further in the examination of grief?
Well, I find it's a really interesting thing to talk about. I mean, as soon as you start talking about it, you realise that, oh, this isn't something that we talk about. Like, you talk about the person and you talk about what you miss and you talk about what happened to them, but you don't talk about what you're left with very often. And because I didn't want to talk about Caroline, because I didn't feel right doing that, the only way that I could talk about the whole experience was the feeling that I was left with. And so I went as deep into it as I was willing to without, you know, talking about her, basically. And it felt really good. There's a podcast I loved. I've actually been on called Griefcast with Carrie Lloyd. And it's the one podcast that I'm so jealous I didn't come up with the idea for. It's absolutely genius. I went on to talk about my mum, and just the fact that people kind of sit, and there is absolutely no one who isn't helped by the conversation of grief. When you hear people talking about life with grief, beyond grief, it helps us all. So it feels good to have written down my experience of it. And honestly, out of everything in the book, that's what I've received most feedback about. Private emails, private messages, saying you articulated a feeling that I didn't know how to articulate. And that means that I feel now I'm very nervous about writing about it. I'm very nervous about, I was nervous that the press would pick that up and make it look like I'd written a book about Caroline, if I'm honest with you.
Sure.
I felt sick at the thought of it. And that actually isn't what's happened, because most people have read that and felt the human side of this whole, you know, thing. And so now I'm really, really pleased. If I had not put that in the book, it would have been a very disingenuous version of 2020.
Yeah, definitely. I love you sort of describe your sort of WhatsApp groups and so forth, and there's a lovely thing, and just made me a little bit sad about, you know, talking about female friendships. and how important they are. And obviously you can only speak for your own identity, but your boys are going to grow up with so many lovely female role models around them. You mustn't feel bad that they're, and also it's, what's interesting is, you know, I think sometimes, you know, I don't think men necessarily need International Men's Day. I'm not one of those guys. But I think if we can talk about men...
You should be the face of it.
We can talk about men's mental health, and I think we can talk about men opening up, and I think that's a good thing. And I think male companionship is a, you know, a different but an equally special thing. But it's something that men probably, you know, would sort of hesitate to talk about. But it was interesting is I love how you're obviously bringing your boys up in and I was lucky enough to be brought up around my sister and my mother. Similarly, you're bringing them up to, you know, you're bringing them up as a great role model, and you're surrounded by women.
When you're a mother of boys, I understand that the only reason feminism exists is because the way that boys have been raised. The only reason that women are considered less than is because of the way that boys have been raised. So we can teach our daughters to stand up for themselves and be strong and strive for what they want, but we have to teach the guys to not feel like they're more than or better than or more powerful than. And you know, when I had boys, I wanted boys, and I'm so happy you had a boy because I just love little boys so much. I wanted boys, and as soon as I pushed Valentine out of me, God, like She-Ra on the bed, and I was like, it is my, what's the word? I can remember said it to Chris. I said, it is my mission in life to raise great men. And by great men, I don't mean strong, powerful men. I mean lovely, compassionate, sweet, smart, funny men who could cook a Sunday roast for all their friends.
Yeah. Yeah. I love towards the end of the book as well that you've got this, there's a lovely, and being sort of what I describe as a child of two fathers, being born here but raised Irish is, I always think the Irish and the English are far more in common than they like to admit. But the main difference for me was really interesting that you summed up, and it really made me laugh in the book, where you talk about the English being naturally kind of a bit grumpy and a little bit kind of more truculent, and then the Irish just sort of imbued with this sometimes blind positivity.
Yeah. Well, I'd be like, so I say it at the end of the book, but an example would be, and this is me making up an example, but just to give you an idea, we'd all be sitting around the table in Ireland and someone would say, oh, someone passed. And I'd be like, how? What happened? Like, God, let's get into the nitty gritty of how they died. Like, what was it? What got them in the end? And they all just like, we don't need to talk about that. Let's just like, so it's very sad, celebrate the life and always spin towards the positive. And I was like, God, I don't do that. I want to spiral.
That's why. Like, but the amount of pent up stuff that goes on with it in an
I know.
Just like, maybe we should be talking about this. We can exercise these deep. No, okay, let's just tighten it right up.
I know. Same.
What are your main? Before we finish, what are your main? What are your thoughts? You know, what lessons have you learned? Your main take homes from 2020?
I have learned that. Oh God, the people close to you, I think I've always been one of those people who's like, please an audience, spread myself thin, like be popular. I feel like that's been knocked out of me this year. My small circle, the small circles that I create both socially with work is enough for me, and it's lovely. Take care of the circle that you're in. I've also learned that, honestly, like, it sounds so cheesy, but just with so many things, you don't know what's going to happen. I could never have predicted that would happen to Caroline. I could never have predicted that COVID would happen. And, you know, who knows what this election is going to be like. Just focus on the day, be present. Because this whole kind of what's next, saving for a rainy day, like being like, you know, just live in the moment more, because anything can change at any minute. And it's such a cliche of a thing to say, and something that, you know, just can't believe it's coming out of my mouth as the most obvious thing, but it's such a lesson in just make sure you're all right now. Make sure that everything around you is okay, and take care of the day in progress and enjoy it. Yeah. Stop like fantasizing about what life could be and try to make the most of what's happening.
It's so true. It's just taking those little things, enjoying that cup of coffee is, you know, that you kick your day off is just so important. And that just that level of empathy, I think that we're sort of like, we're almost waking up from the fog of the Twitter pylons, and just I think now there's almost this acceptance of people going, actually, it's not really okay to be like that to other people, is it?
No. I also think just relinquishing control and feeling like you cannot control what happens to the people that you love or the world around you or anything, but you could control how you respond and how you start your day and the decisions that go on in your head. And also, just to remember that you are in control of your life.
I think for a terrible year and for this extraordinary and horrible pandemic, those lessons that you can learn and that kind of, that full stop moment is the best we can take from it, really. And if that's all we take from it, then at least it's something. That idea of actually looking after each other and appreciating the smaller things.
Yeah.
What happens now? When do you start to write again, or?
I'm writing my first screenplay, and so that's what I'm doing at the moment. And then I've got another book to be in April. So running those things alongside each other. What I love is I gave up TV years ago, which is great enough full-time writing and not trying to do anything else, like having a clothing line or be on TV. And so I'm loving it. Lockdown, actually, now the kids can have childcare again. I'm in my office all day with 2 kittens writing a film, and I swear this is as good as it gets.
Are you in heaven?
Chris is coming in going, "You've peaked, haven't you?" And I'm like, I don't know what else there is than just surrounded by kittens writing films. I don't know what else. It's amazing. Can I just ask you a couple of questions about this?
Yeah.
So how many of these so far?
4.
4. Are you going to do another one?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to do 5, and then I might do 6, but I might do another book that I'm sort of pitching to my publisher at the moment, like that kind of.
A grown-up one or a kid's one?
Kind of probably a little bit tiny bit older, maybe young adult.
Great. Well, I just want to say to everybody, I'm reading this to Art at the moment at night, and he absolutely loves it because I'm sure you can tell my family is obsessed with pussycats. So this is winning his heart. Big Dermot fan.
It's based on or inspired by my lovely cat who's asleep somewhere.
Who I love.
Yeah, she's great.
I've buried my face into that cat a few times, let me tell you.
Also, she's great because she nuzzles the baby as well. She's just wonderful. The cats love the baby. Both of the cats really, really keen on it.
That's so lovely.
Really.
And they love it. They love it when you have a baby because you're just home all the time. Well, COVID as well, but you're just home all the time being cuddly.
Do you know, because when you have cats and you bring in a baby into the house, we just go back to feminism now in a weird, there's this links in a weird way. I was quite nervous because you hear all these stories of cats sleeping on babies' faces and stuff. Do you know there hasn't been one recorded case in the world, and I looked this up, of a cat sleeping on a baby's face and suffocating the baby.
It's so annoying.
It all came from the Salem witch trials, and that's where the myth started because they needed something to pin on these women. And so a few of the women had cats, and then that was where the whole thing. I mean, look, I don't know how much. This is just stuff I've read, but that's kind of anecdotally. That's what I read.
That's amazing.
Brilliant.
God, my old auntie. That's a bit rude. My auntie, when she would be like, she'd always say that as soon as I got pregnant, she goes, "The cat's gonna suffocate the baby. The cat will sleep on the baby's head." I'm like,
you always need that auntie. You always need an auntie that when you're on holiday in Italy calls you to let you know there's an earthquake in Turkey. You're like, I think I'm gonna be alright. But
the disaster aunt.
Yeah.
There's a big for you.
Disaster aunt.
Disaster aunt.
All right, I'm gonna go and have a margarita.
All right, sweetheart. Me too. No, actually, don't. It's lunchtime.
What's our recipe, by the way? Because I've never really made myself a margarita.
It's 2 parts tequila, 1 part triple sec, 1 part fresh lime juice.
And that's it.
That's it. Oh, on ice, shaken.
And the tequila, what kind of tequila are we looking at?
George Clooney's because he's my boyfriend.
Of course. Congratulations, That's lovely.
Very much in love.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed this.
Thank you, darling. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. If we didn't do questions, then ask me on Instagram afterwards and I'll answer anything.
Big love.
Thanks, Dermot. I love you.
Love you too. Bye, everyone.